Hello and welcome to Dealing with Debt. I'm Carol Roberts, your Community Resource Development Agent at the University of Florida IFAS Extension in St. Lucie. Today we're going to talk about how we get in debt, why we need debt, and how to get out of debt when it's become a little bit overwhelming. Some just basically good debt management practices, because with credit use comes debt and we need to know how to get ourselves out of that. So let's get started. The first thing we really need to talk about, though, is what is debt? Debt is just simply that which is owed. It could be money, it could be a service, could be, lots of things, but when you owe someone something, that you owe a debt. There's different types of financial debt. Sometimes you'll hear of secured debt. That means that there's something that debt was secured with that could be taken away if the payments to pay off that purchase were not made, such as a home or a car. Unsecured debt is just the opposite. There's nothing they can take away if the debt payments for that purchase are not paid. Something like going out to dinner on a credit card or a vacation. No way they can take that vacation back after you default on the credit card that you used to pay for that trip. Promissory note. It can be very involved. It can be as simple as an IOU. Hey buddy, can I borrow $5 for a burger? Sure. I owe you $5 now. So, and another type of debt is that's related to investing is called a bond. And we won't talk about that here. I just wanted to mention that is a type of a debt that you can make money off of if you are, but that's another whole program. So it's okay to have debt. That's normal, especially if we're using credit, but being deep in debt can be difficult to get out of. So what are some of the warning signs that we need to look for that tell us that we're having a little trouble managing our money? Well, you might have no savings. That's a big red flag that you're getting deep in debt. Not being able to put away money into an emergency fund for life's little expenses is an indication that you need to manage your money a little more wisely so that you can be ready for those unexpected expenses. Carrying multiple balances or only making the minimum payment on those balances to your credit cards is also a indication of that you're having trouble with debt. We want to always pay more than the minimum payment so that we can not have to carry a balance and lower the amount of interest we're charged on our credit cards. And we want to keep our credit card use to a minimum so we don't overextend and have multiple payments to make. It's so easy to miss one, and then what happens when we're late or miss a payment? It affects our credit score. So we don't want to avoid that. Using payday loan services is also a indication that you might be having trouble with debt, when especially if you have to carry that payday loan over and over, roll it over because you're not able to pay it back. Phone calls from debt collectors, well, there's a big red flag that you're not that you're having trouble with your money, that when balances are going unpaid and your creditors are having to call to ask you when you'll be able to make a payment, that's something we want to avoid. And if you're unable to qualify for financing, that's a really big indicator that you might be overextending on debt, on your credit use, and having trouble getting out of debt. So if you're not sure and you're wondering how deep in debt might you be, there's a really nice tool to help you find that out: your credit report. There is one site on the web, annualcreditreport.com, that's provided by the federal government. It gives you access to all 3 major credit bureaus, your credit history with those bureaus. You're allowed to check your reports, your credit files with those bureaus once a year for free at annualcreditreport.com. When you access your credit report, you might notice a couple of things. Uh, Perhaps not all debts are reported by the same credit reporting agency. You want you want to make sure you access your credit report from all three major credit bureaus to make sure they all say the same thing. Some debts that are no longer reported are still owed because your credit report should reflect 7 years of your credit history. And after that 7 years, if there's been no activity, that account has to come off your credit report. However, that doesn't mean that the debt that fell off your credit report is not still owed. It can be. But it's important to check our credit report because actually 2/3 of all credit reports have errors on them. And you don't want your creditors to see misinformation that will prevent them from providing you credit in the future. If you are denied credit, keep in mind you're due a free credit report so you can see why you were denied. So once you access your credit report, you'll see a lot of information in that file. Some of it could be negative credit information. Things like late payments will show on your credit report. If you've been more than 30 days late to a creditor, they document that. Actually, if you've been more than 60 or 90 days late, they also document that. So, and that's the biggest impact to our credit scores is those late payments. So we want to keep those to a minimum or avoid them if we can at all. If you've defaulted on a debt account and it's been charged off, you'll see that information on the original account, and you'll see the debt collection agency that has now owns that debt. Any repossessions, liens, or judgments against you will also show on your credit report, and bankruptcies, if you've had to file bankruptcy, that will show on your credit report for 7 to 10 years, a little bit longer than everything else, but it will be there for your creditors to see. So once you access your credit report, you may see that your credit file is one of those 2/3 that has an error on them. Or there may be something you see that you want to dispute. You don't agree with the report that was provided. Maybe you see an account that you're sure you paid off in full, but it still says there's a balance owed. You have the right to dispute any entry on your credit file. At each of the major credit bureau sites, they have a little link off to the side of your account that says dispute. You can click on that and choose the reason that you're disputing that. Once you dispute the information, the credit bureau has to verify it within 45 days. If they can't show that their information was correct, that entry has to come off of your credit report. If they come back within 45 days and say, yes, we think that's a valid account and all the information's correct, you still have the option to provide a 100-word statement on each of your credit accounts that tells your side of the story. You're eligible to do that. You can find that access to that through annualcreditreport.com and click it, going to each of the major credit bureaus that you have access to through that site. So unfortunately, if you have defaulted on debt, there's some things you need to know going forward so you get the best result possible and you don't get taken advantage of by some of these not so savory debt collection agencies. So the first thing you need to know when you're being contacted by a debt collector is, are they the original creditor, or has your account been sold to someone else? That makes a difference on how they can speak to you. If it's the first party debt collector, that means the organization that you originally opened the account with, say AT&T or some company like that. You had you have an account and haven't been making a payment, so they're calling to find out why. That's the first party debt collector, and there are really no rules on how they can speak to you because mostly it's not necessary. You're their customer. They want to retain you as a customer, so it's in their best interest to be polite and accommodating and help you work out a resolution. Unfortunately, most of the time when we're contacted about a debt that needs to be collected, it's by a third party debt collector. And they are not, that we are not their customer. And they have in the past tended to not treat people nicely. So our federal government got together and created a thing called the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act that dictates how a debt collection agency can treat people when they're contacting them. So this is why it's important to know who you're being contacted by. Is it a first party or a third party debt collector? Third party debt collectors, you are not their customer. Your creditor, the original creditor, the first party, that's their customer. They make their money by buying your outstanding accounts for pennies on the dollar. And then however much they can collect, that's how they make their money. So they tend to apply aggressive practices that have caused problems in the past for people. So let's look at what a third-party debt collection agency can do and what our options are. The first thing we need to know about debt collection is that there is a statute of limitations on being prosecuted for a debt. This is important because some debt collection agencies have been known to threaten legal prosecution for an outstanding debt when the statute of limitations is actually passed on that account. So it's important to know that under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, a debt collector cannot make an empty threat. They can't threaten to sue you for the debt if they don't intend to actually do that. So we need to know what the statute of limitations on debt is in Florida. In Florida, the statute of limitations on open-ended credit is 4 years. That means that those credit accounts, those unsecured debt accounts, they have 4 years to prosecute us for that debt. And after that, they can only try to collect the funds. They can't file a legal judgment against us. Statute of limitation on a mortgage or a contract in Florida is 5 years, and 20 years on a judgment or a lien. Very important to note that there is no statute of limitations anywhere in the United States on federal student loans, past due child support, most types of fines, and taxes. Unfortunately, we can always be prosecuted for defaulting on those 4 kinds of expenses. So like I mentioned before, the statute of limitation only refers to the legal action that a account holder can take against you for the debt. Even after the statute of limitations is up, you can still be contacted by debt collectors attempting to collect on the debt that was owed. And when they do, it's important that you know that you can possibly say things that reset the clock. And resetting the clock means that if you acknowledge that you recognize that debt that they're calling about, they have the ability to update your credit file with a new date of last activity, and in doing so, that account will remain on your account from 7 years of the date of the most recent last activity. So if they called you yesterday about an account that was 6 years old, and you say, yeah, I know, I just don't have the money to pay that, you have just reset the clock. By acknowledging, yeah, I know, that means you recognize that account and they can reset your clock. So if you're contacted about a debt that you are not in a position to pay off, you have the option of saying, I cannot speak to you. I'm not going to tell you to lie and say you don't recognize it. That wouldn't be nice. But you have the option of just not answering their questions at all and saying, I cannot speak to you. Send me this information in writing for me to review. That will not reset the clock. So if you're being contacted by a debt collector, it's important to know your rights under the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. In summary, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act says that a collection caller should be businesslike, not insult you, not intimidate you, not call before the hour of 8 a.m. or after the hour of 9 p.m. unless you allow that, not call you at work unless you give them permission, and they have to follow up in writing after they've contacted you. So your options in general is you don't have to take the call. You have the right to tell that debt collector, I don't want to speak to you. Please give me your address so I can send you a cease and desist letter. And you should never hear from that debt collector again. Also, you can, your option is to document all contact. You really want to do that if you're being contacted by a debt collector who's coming across as intimidating or insulting, or not following the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act rule. Document when they called you, who you spoke with. You actually have the right to tape the call because, you know, every time they call you, they say, we just have to let you know that this is a debt collection agency and we're attempting to collect a debt. You have every right to respond with, that's fine. I would like to tape this call for quality assurance purposes too. They can let you know if you're allowed, if they will allow you to do that. But you cannot tape a conversation without, you can't record a conversation without permission from the other party in the conversation. That's against the law. So you don't want to break the law also. But if they allow you to take the call, then you can have backup to document a case against this debt collection agency or ensure that they will treat you properly while you're on the call. And your option is, if you are ready and can pay the debt, you can negotiate to pay off that debt. You know that they collected that account of yours, they purchased for pennies on the dollar. Say you owe $300, they may be paid $25.50 for it. Whatever they settle it for is the way that they make their profit. So knowing that, you can offer them some sort of reasonable amount, about probably to 40 to 50%. You can start there. Get the details of whatever settlement is negotiated in writing, and then pay based on that written agreement. But make sure you get that offer in writing before you make any payments to them. If that debt collector you're talking to is not following the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, you have options. Are they threatening you? Are they harassing you? Are they calling you at the wrong time? Did they disclose your private information to someone else? Also against the rule. Hey, this is such and such debt collection agency. We're here, you're so-and-so's grandma? Well, we're just trying to collect a debt. Is so-and-so home? Ooh, they broke the law. So if that happens, you have options. You can file a complaint with the Federal Trade Commission or your state's chief financial officer. Here in Florida, you can reach our state CFO at the phone number 800-848-3792. Or you can file a complaint directly on their website at www.flofr.com. And that, once you file a complaint, that debt collection agency will be under investigation. You also have the right to sue for damages. There are consumer advocate groups out there that are just waiting for you to provide them proof that a debt collector broke the law, and they will sue on your behalf. Don't wait, because you only have 1 year from the date of that contact to file suit. That statute of limitations affects you too. But if you have proof that a debt collector broke the law, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act law, they can be forced in a settlement to pay your debt back and be fined for their bad practices. So, you know, collect your data, make sure you can tape them, whatever you need to do to get that proof so you can sue them and make them pay your debt off. So if we're being contacted by debt collectors, that is a big red flag. But sometimes we manage our money a little bit better and we don't have that red flag for us, but we know that we need credit assistance. So we need to get a better handle on our money. You can be proactive and take care of it yourself. Develop a budget. Do your spending plan. That's another video you'll find here in these blogs about how to do a spending plan. Determine how much money you have to pay off those debts, and then contact your creditors. Don't wait for them to call you. Tell them, I'm going to be late on a payment. Can I modify my payment plan? Maybe defer a payment till the end of the loan? Or can we make an adjustment to how much is owed this month and I can make it up next month? But if it's secured debt, maybe it's something you need to consider turning back in or selling to avoid defaulting on the loan for that secured debt. But whatever you do, contact your creditors and let them know, because they don't know what's happening to you on a day-to-day basis. If you're not answering the call, all they can do is assume that you just don't want to pay that debt. If you call them, they will work with you. They really just want their payments. They want you to make the payments you made. They will help you to be able to do that so you don't default on the debt. And once you've settled any negotiated debts, make sure that you can request that the credit reporting agency update your credit file as paid as agreed, because that looks better on a credit report. If you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by debt, you can speak with a credit counseling service. They have trained counselors that will help you develop your budget and teach you some good money management skills. Most credit counseling services are not for profit. Some are not legitimate, so you want to check them out. If someone is asking you at a credit counseling service to pay a voluntary contribution, or requiring a voluntary contribution before they can assist you, that's a big red flag that they are not a legitimate credit counseling service. Beware of any upfront costs. They are not allowed by law to charge you for their services until those services are complete. You may work with a credit counselor that suggests a debt management plan. And this is where, instead of you managing your money, they do it for you. They help you with that. You make a monthly deposit to their organization, and they work with your debtors to apply that payment to those debts. Could take more than 48 months to complete, and they will require that you not apply or use credit while you're in their debt management plan. But it is a way to get your credit accounts under control. The next step above debt management is actually debt negotiation program. That's where a firm will actually negotiate your current and outstanding debts, have you make a payment like the debt management plan, and then they pay those debts for you on a regular basis. Be careful about the fees, again, that might be charged for this kind of a debt negotiation program. You want to make sure that they are disclosing all the terms, provide you a contract of what they're going to do and how long it's going to take to do it, and what the fee for this would be that you'll pay once they have completed their part of the contract. So they actually do the negotiation for you, really, is the difference between this and a debt management plan. Another option you might consider is a debt consolidation loan. Some people can have equity in their home or take out a personal loan to consolidate debt, which is a method for eliminating debt. However, it only works if your spending habits change. If your debt consolidation loan pays off all your credit cards, you have a bunch of empty balances now, and you have this loan, and then you go right back out and run all those credit card balances up again. Now you're more deep in debt, and you don't have the option of using your equity anymore. So it only works if you change your spending habits. You can get a lower rate on a debt consolidation loan. Sometimes the banks will offer no closing costs for a debt consolidation loan, but realize that if you are deep in debt, you probably won't be getting the best interest rate available because of that debt. So it will cost you some money to pay off that debt, but this can be a way to consolidate all those payments into one balance and get it knocked down. There are tax advantages also, but I would speak to your bank about that and your tax advisor, and keep an eye out for any additional fees or higher payoff costs that on your home or that personal loan because of the length of time that it took to pay that debt consolidation loan. Just some basic information about those credit repair clinics that offer credit counseling and debt management plans. Keep in mind that only accurate information should be on your credit report. If somebody is telling you that accurate information, although negative, can be removed from your credit report, I would take that as a big red flag that they may not be the legitimate credit repair clinic. They have to provide you a written contract and tell you what they're going to do to earn your fee. And I've heard of other credit repair clinics that will suggest creating a whole new credit identity for you to repair your credit. That's also a big red flag if they're going to set you up a whole new credit identity or dispute all the information on your credit report. Those are not recommended practices. Bottom line is, only time and a conscientious effort to repay your debts will improve your credit score. These quick fixes, be wary. There is, however, one quick fix for your credit or debt problems that is legal, but it's a last resort maneuver. When you are so deep in debt that it might take more than 4 years to climb back out of that debt pit, financial advisors will recommend filing for bankruptcy. Most people will be forced into Chapter 13, a reorganization that is basically a court-ordered debt management plan. Some people will qualify for total liquidation. That means that a certain amount of property that you own, your one car, one home, you're allowed to keep. Everything else must be sold to pay your creditors, and the remaining debt that you have is discharged. It's much harder to qualify for Chapter 7, and with either Chapter 7 or Chapter 13, there are certain debts that cannot be included in a bankruptcy, such as federal student loans, and the fact that you had to file bankruptcy will stay on your credit report for at least 10 years and impact your credit score for that long. So really, it is a last resort maneuver. So we don't want to end up deep in debt. We have to make sure that we're monitoring our own credit on a regular basis. Review your credit report periodically. Make sure that it has accurate information. Make sure that you know what your creditors are saying about you and how that information might affect you if you are applying for credit in the near future. And make sure you recognize all the accounts so that you and ensure that you have not been a victim of identity theft. Because even someone with a bad or a negative financial history can be a victim of identity theft. Well, that's it. We talked all about debt. Aren't you glad that's over? Well, what we learned today, we talked about good debt versus bad debt. We looked at how to find out how deep in debt we are. We looked at the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act and our rights when dealing with debt collectors. And we finished it off with just looking at the different tools available to us for eliminating those debts. We are glad to know these things, aren't we? And how did we learn it? Well, we learned it from your county extension office. And we're not talking lash extensions, hair extensions, leg extensions, or even an extension cord. We are talking the extension of the land grant system that has been around for more than 100 years, providing adult education across the nation. You have an extension office in every state in the nation. In Florida, we're lucky to have an extension office in all 67 counties. You can go there to get face-to-face information, lots of resources, and we do this well. University of Florida teaches its extension agents to provide quality, research-based, non-biased information that helps you make better decisions, and we're here for you. Call your local extension office. Watch for the next series of videos and webinars that are going to help you make better decisions, and take advantage of your extension service. Your federal tax dollars pay for it, so if you're not using your extension resources, you're leaving money on the table. Thanks and have a great day.